Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So here we are on a fabulous another episode of It Starts With You. Now, this has taken a while to get in the diary because the gentleman joining me today is incredibly busy. I am a massive fan, Simon, of your work. Perhaps maybe rather than me introduce yourself, do you want to just introduce yourself to the viewers and the listeners, who you are, what you do, what you're all about, if people haven't come across you already?
Yeah, sure. So I used to work in a financial services career. In fact, when I grew up here in the UK, I had this mistaken belief that success would be defined by my job title. Be a banker, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an accountant. And I was also seduced by films like Boiler Room and Wall Street. And so when I graduated from university, I started a career in finance at probably the worst possible time. It was the middle of 2007, a year before the financial crisis swept across the world. And to make things a little more interesting, Vicky, the company I started with was Lehman Brothers,
Oh,
which collapsed 14 months after I joined. And so that kickstarted a very volatile career for nearly 10 years of being in and out of jobs in that industry. But it was instrumental in the sense that without the crisis, I don't think I would have questioned my definition of success. And so with the crisis, I started to ask myself whether this was success. Was this what I wanted? And the answer was a clear no, because even though it paid well on paper, I I felt deeply unfulfilled. I felt like there was something greater than what I was doing in that moment. And so I made the longest journey that we as humans make, which are the inches from our heads to our hearts. Never an easy journey, but the most important we will ever make. And that eventually led me to what I now get to do today, which is coaching some incredible clients, speaking on stages across the world, writing books, and now consulting and investing in young companies to help take their ideas and messages out in the world.
I honestly, Simon, I think the work that you do is just phenomenal. I really do. So, I mean, we met through the coaching academy. We both
Mhm.
know that we trained about the same time. That is when I went off and found the world of disc and went, oh, I
Mhm.
love that. You stayed in the coaching side of it. I mean, I still do the coaching, but I don't promote myself as a
Mm.
coach. We both won, was it 2019? Did we win?
Yes, I remember clearly 2019 because it was a few months before we went into the first lockdown.
It was like November time, wasn't it? You won
Yeah.
coach of the year and I won disc in coaching that year. So that's phenomenal. I mean, if we talk about your behaviors and your profile, you're more on the reserved side, are you not?
Yeah, I would consider myself more the reserve side, which is quite surprising for some people to hear because their only exposure to my work would have been on stage where they've seen me speak or they've seen my content on social media. And we tend to automatically assume that because somebody speaks a lot, they must be an extrovert. So often when I tell people I'm a little more reserved, it can and does come as a surprise.
But it doesn't surprise me. I think just
Hmm.
because actually, when I look at your YouTube channel, we'll talk about that in a minute. You
Yeah.
you do very much talk to the even when you're on stage, and I've seen you,
Hmm.
perform. You do feel like you're just talking to that one person. You
Hmm.
have a great way of talking. So in disc terms, we'd call that reserved, people focused, S the
Yeah.
green style, but you flip into the yellow eye style when you're on stage and when you
Hmm.
need to, when you've got a huge group of people. But it's also probably why, as a coach, you are so successful because you love that one-to-one work.
Hmm.
So
Um,
tell me about you as a child, as your upbringing.
my my upbringing was interesting because I was in this town in southeast England. So I grew up in Kent. in a town called Dartford. And at the time, I was one of probably only five or six Chinese students, not just in my year, but the entire school. And so we were very much a minority. And my parents wanted to integrate us into the culture and into being part of the UK. And so we didn't learn our native language. We learned English, and so we lost a lot of that ability to speak Chinese when we were young. But they still instilled in us that Chinese work ethic. So it was all about work hard, get the top grades, uh, perform well, and you were put a great foundation together for your career ahead. But it was also tough in the sense that, with my parents, it was also quite tough from the emotional intelligence side of things. It's very tough for my brother and I to kind of openly talk about our feelings, what we were going through. And so that made it tough on us as children growing up. We couldn't share this with our friends. And so very much it was us to ourselves. And that's probably why we were very shy and quiet growing up.
Yeah.
And eventually when I was 17, my brother was 16, when we lost our mum in a tragic accident, that was even tougher because back then there were no resources for mental health support. You couldn't just hop onto social media and listen to someone's video or advice. There just wasn't these tools around. So growing up was tough in a lot of different ways, but in a way when I look back, Vicky, it kind of made me who I am now in terms of what I learned through those experiences. And it helped to build up a lot of resilience.
Mm.
I think that while many of us fear challenges, I think they're necessary because they really develop your inner strength. And I think that's what helped me to navigate a lot of the crises that would come in later years.
Yeah.
So yeah, upbringing was tough. Uh, Working hard was where I had to find my peace, was where I had to find my self-worth. And if I got great grades, it was the key to making not just myself, but also my family proud of me.
Yeah. And that's the, like you say, the cultural differences as well.
Hmm.
But being on the reserved side of things, when did you notice then, in terms of the impact of your behaviours on others, or where you perhaps had to look in the mirror and think, well, I need to flex and adapt who I am?
I think it probably wasn't until I decided I wanted to work for myself. So
Mhm.
even through my teenage years, I was very reserved. When I got to university, it was difficult making lots of friends. I mean, the friends I did make, we did become good friends because again, I'm very people focused. I like learning about people. I'm curious. I like asking questions. But it was very tough for me to go out and openly start conversations. But when I decided that, long term, I want to work for myself, I want to create something of value. At that point, I realized that without my ability to communicate, I'm going to be the biggest obstacle to my growth. And so I realized that
Gold dust there, gold dust,
yeah,
Simon.
I had this moment where I had to change. There was no other choice. And so the way I did that is I understood when I read books and I learned from mentors and coaches is that if a process feels like a chore, you're never going to have a healthy relationship with it. It's always going to feel like you're pushing yourself up a hill and you're never really going to make the progress and momentum you want. However, if you could turn the process into almost like a game where the process becomes fun and enjoyable, then you're more likely to show up and do the work necessary to develop that new skill. And that's what I did. I started to say to myself, how can I turn the ability to communicate better into a game? And one of the first challenges I gave myself was when I would go to networking events, instead of answering the question which most of us get, what do you do? Tell us about yourself. What do you do? I said to myself, my challenge is to not introduce myself with a title. How can I talk a little bit about my origin story and the mission I'm on within the first 30 seconds to a minute instead of leading with a title? So that was almost like my first challenge, if you will, which made it a lot more fun and enjoyable. And then I would just come up with all of these games to make the process more fun. And before I knew it, I started to enjoy it. And that's what kind of led me to really want to understand the mechanics of speaking better, whether that was the art of conversation, whether that was speaking on stage, whether that was doing an interview. I really wanted to become a student of this area because I started to see the impact it was having on my own growth, as well as my business.
Wow. That's phenomenal. So, what is your mission?
So my mission really, uh, is to show people that anything is possible when they focus on the things that make them feel alive, when they focus on the things that give them energy. Because when I look at my own journey, but also the journey of a lot of people around me, what I quickly notice, and you might notice this as well, Vicky, is that many people are exhausted not because they are physically doing too much, but because they are doing too little of the things that bring them joy, and they are running someone else's race.
Mm,
So what they actually have is not physical exhaustion, but mental and spiritual exhaustion.
mm.
And if I can show them that they are both the author and the main character, they are both the sculpture and the sculptor, then hopefully that becomes a small step to empower them to write a better future. And if I can do that in any small way, that is the greatest reward for the work I do.
Wow. And that's what you've done in your own life, isn't it?
Mm,
You've you've created a world of joy that you live in with your family, and
mm.
your young daughter, and it's wonderful to see. Um, I do want to ask you. I have to ask you on this podcast because I know people are going to want to listen. So you hit. I'm going to talk about your YouTube channel, and obviously, listeners, everything will be in the show notes. You hit 100,000 subscribers within a year. Well, it was less than a year, wasn't it?
Yes, 10 months. So in 10 months, we hit 100,000 subscribers. And in 12 months, which was just a week or two ago, we hit over 130,000 subscribers.
And when you say we, this isn't just one channel. This isn't just your channel. This is your wife's channel on her
Yeah,
business.
both. Absolutely. Both my wife's and I, channels. And it's great to have a co-pilot in this because I'm going to be honest, Vicky. I don't think I could have done this on my own. Um, you you look at how people succeed, and it's having a good team around them. You have to have a good team around you. And my wife and I were very fortunate that we bring different things to the table. She is amazing at the technical side of things. So without her, I wouldn't know how to set up the camera, get all the things put together and get the videos edited. And me, what I bring to the table is a strategy. So I love strategy.
Yeah.
I love codifying how things work, whether it, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's public speaking, whether it's how to communicate, whether it's how to grow a YouTube channel. And so I bring that to the table and we sit down and we literally put our two brains together and we work out how we're going to go about the video production. And to have someone that you can talk to openly about this and be on that journey with you, just for me, helps you commit to being more consistent.
Hmm. So, would you say so? So, if people are listening, thinking, "Well, this is great," because obviously you and your wife both have your own businesses, but I
Hmm.
don't have a partner that I have a business with. Where can I go to get this kind of help?
So I think the beauty of today's world is that the information you seek has never been more accessible. For me to take the weight off my wife helping me edit, for example, I went onto YouTube and literally typed in, how do I edit a video and put B-roll on top using Adobe Premiere, which is the tool that I use. And there are so many tutorial videos that are free on YouTube. So I would just sit down, watch some of these videos, and I would test some of these skills on the platform. And I'll say, "Oh, I've learned this new skill, how to do this effect on my video. Let me go give it a try." And so all the information we seek is out there. And then if you want to learn from people ahead of you, let's say YouTube, for example, then what I would do is I would subscribe to those channels that are doing amazing, that are growing really well. And I would look to study the videos that have done exceptionally well for them. So if one video got 4 million views, but they normally get maybe, I don't know, 20, 30,000 views, that I want to know why was it that video did better,
Mm.
and then try and reverse engineer the mechanics for mine. And it was amazing because last year in September, on my birthday, 8th of September last year, I I published a video called I'm 40. If you're in your 20s or 30s, watch this. And it was literally a video sharing 40 life lessons uh, that if I could go back in time, I would share with my younger self. And that video is now nearly 3.5 million views. And in the first 21 days, it amassed over 1 million views. And what was special about that video is that it was shareable. It was a very shareable video. And so that really helped the channel to grow. We had one of these videos that amassed a few million, and that really pushed the video out to a wider audience.
Amazing. Well, I shall make sure that not just your YouTube channel is, but that specific clip is
Mm,
in the show notes as well, so that people can go and watch it. Um, and this is great. So we could go and learn stuff, but it's still that accountability part of it, isn't it?
mm.
And as a coach, what do you say to your clients when they come to you with challenges? Because that's generally why we have a coach, isn't it? We're stuck in a growth part of our life. How do you help people unlock themselves?
I always say the fastest way to unlock yourself is through a question. And a question is like a key that opens a door to a path you never know was there. You never knew was there. But the right question at the right time can be exactly what you need.
Mhm.
So, to give an example, I remember I was working with a client recently, and he had this feeling of just being stuck. He knew what to do, but there were a lot of things on his mind that were stopping him for whatever reason, excuses, doubts, fears, obligations, and so on. And so I didn't want to put myself in a position of saying, hey, I know all the answers because I don't. I don't know his background, his upbringing, his experience. He may be showing things that I'm not privy to. So I simply said to him, imagine if the person sitting opposite you was not me, but it was someone who was exactly like you, that has grown up in the way you've grown up, that has the same problems and issues and challenges you have, that is looking to achieve some of the things you want to achieve. What will you say to that person? And after pausing for a little bit, he came out with a list of advice. And at that moment, he realized that the advice he had just shared was the advice he himself should be taking. And if I reflect on that question, the reason why that particular question was powerful was because it takes us out of our mind and it shifts our perspective. Sometimes all we need is a shift in perspective. It's why when let's say you typically journal at home in your kitchen. If one week you decide to journal in the lobby of a beautiful hotel, suddenly you might find yourself writing a lot more down than you imagine because all you did was change your environment. But that simple shift can be gigantic when it comes to what it does to our mindset. And so, questions that can shift people's perspectives is sometimes the key to unlock that door to a completely new life.
Mm. And I think that is the power of coaching when you
Mm.
find a coach. Now, there was a clip that I'd seen, another something else that you'd said, which was about unlocking. What would you have to do to?
Yeah, so I think the question you're getting at is when people come to me, and often I hear this a lot. It's like, I'll give an example. Another recent conversation, somebody said, Simon, I saw you published a book. I loved how you've marketed the book and got it out in the world. I've been working on this book for about 5 years now. And my first reaction was, 5 years? What's what's the reason it's taken that long to put the book together? I just got curious and wanted to understand the situation at a deeper level. But eventually I clicked on that the reason it's been taking so long is because of all those internal battles they're going through. And they think they've got all the time in the world, but we forget that we don't. We forget how short life can be. And so, a question I always ask people when I sense that they are going through a period of overthinking, and that overthinking, are you thinking about the thinking about the thinking, is stopping them from taking action. I simply ask them this question: how much longer will you avoid doing what you are capable of in order to continue with what you are comfortable doing? And when you let a question like that sit, it really hits them at the core because they then realize, actually, I could be capable of so much more, but I'm just coasting in my comfort zone. And a question like that can be deeply reflective as well as transformative.
Mm. And and it is so powerful. I often feel that it's that, that imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
it comes in, doesn't it? I mean, you must have, when you started writing your book, again, listeners, watchers, I'll put links into that. But when you started writing it, you must have had your own challenges. So how do you overcome those?
I do. And, I still have my own fears and self-doubts. And I think it's important for people to understand that from the people that they aspire to be like, because what I've learned is that you will never eliminate fears and self-doubt. Um, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Your challenge is to create a healthier relationship with it, is to have the courage to try things and say, you know, fear is always going to be with me, self-doubt's always going to be with me, but I'm going to do it regardless because I trust more in my ability to adapt. I trust more in my belief that I will be okay despite those fears and challenges. And when you do that, that's how you build confidence. The more things you do, the more things you try, and the more you show yourself what's possible, the deeper your confidence becomes.
Mm,
And I've gone through my fair share of challenges. When I got the book deal, of course, I was elated. It's not every day you get a book deal with a publisher like Penguin. Um, but it was also the toughest few months of my life because the book deal happened in April 2020. And in April 2020, my wife and I had our daughter. So she was born, I think it was about 5 or 6 days after the first lockdown. And at the same time, all of my speaking that was booked for the 3 to 4 months after April was cancelled
yeah.
because this was at a time where you couldn't have any in-person events. And so nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, September that year, everybody shifted to virtual, which was great because some of that came back. But immediately in those few months after April, the revenue for my speaking business went straight to zero. So I had to balance adapting my business, looking after our daughter because my wife had a C-section. So she was kind of out of action for about 6 to 8 weeks, and to write a book. So there were a lot of things to juggle in what was a very surreal period. And there were moments where I contemplated not finishing the book. I was like, I don't know if I can hit this deadline because once you sign the contract, now you've got to hit deadlines because the editing team needs to review, they need to send feedback, and the process kicks off. And I was just going through a very tough period, emotionally and mentally. And I remember sharing this with my wife, and I said to her, yeah, I'm not sure I can hit the deadline. I'm not sure I can get this over the finish line. And I was very fortunate because we couldn't go out, so we had to stay inside. That I could sit down and just journal my thoughts onto paper. And the moment that kind of got me focused again was when I realized just how lucky and fortunate I am to be in a position where I can write a book, where I have people that believe in me. I've got a publishing house that believes in me. And I said, I'm going to take every advantage of this because somebody else who would dream of having this partnership would take it with both hands. So I have to do this justice. So
Mm.
that was probably one of the toughest periods I went through in my life. And it still happens. We all face challenges. I mean, they change, they evolve when you move up certain levels, but you still face them. They just change in nature.
Yeah. So what is it though about human nature that when we come across challenges, we often find that, so let's the easiest thing is to not face it. It's just okay, well, like you say, I've got a deadline to hit and I'm not going to hit it. And
Mm,
before I sign this contract, you know what? It'd just be easier if I just say no and stay here in
mm.
my comfort zone. What is it about human nature that makes us do that? Because that's a natural thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind because when you talked about, why we don't do things or maybe why we don't jump into things we know we really want to do, but we self-sabotage. One of the things I've noticed for me personally, and this may be the same for others, is what used to hold me back from embracing that fear and jumping in and just seeing what's going to happen and adapt along the way was this need to be validated. You know, if I do this and it doesn't work out, then I've told everyone I'm going to do it. What are they going to think of me? I'm going to be judged, and are they going to see me as a failure? Are they going to see me as, hey, this guy's a loser? And so for so long, I know that was part of my thinking. I would often stop myself from doing something, even though I knew I wanted to do it at some point, and this was part of my dream. I would stop myself for this need for validation. But once I freed myself from that and said, hey, it doesn't matter what they think. What's most important is what I think about what I'm going to do. It was like there was this huge burden lifted off my shoulder. And I felt freer and lighter to just pursue the things that brought me joy and happiness. And I think the second, when I think about what causes us to go for the easy path, is that when you go for the easy path, you can see with certainty, to some degree of certainty, what's going to happen. But when you go to the uncertain path, the difficult one, you don't always know what's going to happen because it's never been done before.
Mm.
So there's a lot more challenge for your mind to comprehend. Whereas if you say, hey, if I if I don't go for this deadline, if I don't finish this, well, I'm still going to be in the same job. I'm going to get paid the same I've always been paid. I can kind of predict where I'm going to go on holiday. Life is predictable. And to an extent, the mind and body enjoy that because there's stability. I can go, okay, there's a lot I can predict. However, what happens is there comes a moment where you don't want that to be predictable. Because if that becomes too predictable, you start to feel lost, you start to stagnate, and you become tired before your day even starts. And the reason you become tired before your day starts, and a lot of people feel this, oh, I've not even gone to work yet, I'm already exhausted. It's because your body and mind can already energetically predict what your day is going to look like. And there'll be a point when you get tired of that. And so when you start doing things that are unpredictable, i.e., diving into the hard path, diving into chasing your dreams, what happens is suddenly you inject energy into your body. Because it cannot predict something, it starts to feel exciting. And you can't predict it, which means, hey, anything can happen. But there is a shift that has to happen to move from one to the other. It's like when you go on holiday to a place you've never been before, you're really excited about it
Mm.
because you don't know what to expect. And so that forces you to live in the present. But when you can already predict something, it's like you've already sapped the enjoyment of it because the mind is already flooded with what that's going to be like. And so I had to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. I had to love being in a zone of my life where everything was unknown. But as a good friend once said to me, when everything is unknown, Simon, anything is possible. And I've held that mantra with me through the journey of entrepreneurship. And it's so true even till today. Vic, if you had asked me when I left the corporate world, would I take a thriving one-to-one coaching practice? I would say absolutely. I want to build a thriving, successful one-to-one coaching practice. But the thing is, it has become a lot more than that. I would never predict at the beginning that the coaching would then open up the doors to speaking. Speaking would open the doors to doing interviews and podcasts and writing books and investing in companies and consulting on different opportunities. I mean, all of this stuff was unpredictable. It was not planned at the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey, but they kind of came about as I stepped on the path and welcomed serendipitous and lucky moments with open arms.
And for anyone that knows disc terms, for somebody that is predominantly a green and S style will
Mm,
know that your greatest fear is the fear of change. And yet
mm,
you have built your life around that, which is just what's probably also why you're so successful, can I say,
mm.
Simon? So whilst like most of my guests, I could talk for hours, I'm going to bring this to a close. And I'm just going to ask you to leave the listeners or viewers just with one thing. If they are sitting there stuck thinking, I really, really want to make that change,
Mm.
what's the one piece of advice you would say to help them take that first step?
Well, true to me being a coach, instead of leaving a bit of advice, I'm going to leave the viewers with a question to reflect on. And I'm going to preface this question with a bit of context. So, one of the things we often forget in our very busy lives, where we are rushing from one task to another, trying to finish our to-do list, is that we are an absolute miracle. The fact that you and I are born is a miracle event. A lot of people have put this event at one in over 400 trillion odds of happening. So the fact that you are born is the greatest lottery ticket you will ever win. So many people think about winning the jackpot of the national regional lottery, but you have already won the lottery of life. And so the question for you is, what will you do with that winning ticket of yours? What will you do with that winning ticket of yours? Because as Aristotle said, we all have two lives. The second begins the moment you realize you only have one.
Powerful ending.
Mm.
Simon, thank you for this conversation. As I say to everyone, the show notes will be full of all of Simon's details, and I'd love to hear what you've taken away from that. I've scribbled two pages of notes myself.
Well, Vicky, thank you so much for having me on. It was a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure, Simon. Thank you. How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.